It was a routine Wednesday afternoon, and the Green Market grocery store in a modest Brooklyn neighborhood was filled with activity. The aisles were crowded with shoppers who had come to stock up on their weekly groceries, and their carts piled high with everything from fresh produce to canned goods. The hum of the store was a comforting backdrop to the busy lives of the people who relied on it. It wasn't an upscale supermarket, but it had everything people in the area needed to get by. The store was a community hub, a place where families, elderly residents, and young professionals alike did their shopping. Many of the customers here were regulars, and for some, it was the only place they could afford to buy what they needed. The store offered fair prices, but for those on a tight budget, even the smallest price increase could lead to difficult decisions. Barron Trump had come to the Green Market grocery store for a quiet errand, trying to avoid the chaos of a more well-known store. Dressed in a simple gray hoodie and dark jeans, Barron blended in easily with the crowd. He wasn't here to make a statement, he wasn't here to seek attention. He was just like anyone else, quietly going about his day. He had become accustomed to the scrutiny that came with his last name, but today he wasn't interested in that. He simply needed some groceries and wanted a moment of peace away from the glare of the public eye. As Barron wandered through the aisles, grabbing some fresh vegetables and a few items for his apartment, he noticed the faces around him. There was something different today, an underlying tension that he couldn't quite place. Barron, having grown up in a world of privilege, was no stranger to seeing hardship, but there was something about the people here today that made him pause. He caught sight of an older woman in her late 60s, her hands trembling as she reached for a carton of eggs. The price tag was clearly a concern for her, and Barron could see the hesitation in her eyes as she weighed whether to place the eggs in her cart. It wasn't the first time Barron had witnessed people agonizing over small expenses, but something about her sadness struck a chord in him. Just a few dollars made the difference between a full cart and a sparse one. Further down the aisle, Barron noticed a young mother with 2 small children. She was trying to balance her shopping list with the needs of her kids, who were pulling at her sleeves and demanding attention. Barron could see the worry on her face as she checked the price of several items, doing mental calculations as she tried to stretch every dollar. The stress in her eyes was palpable, and Barron's heart went out to her. He moved past her, but his thoughts lingered. How many others here were struggling the same way? He'd heard stories before of families having to make a choice between food and rent, between buying diapers or paying for medicine. But seeing it firsthand here in this neighborhood made it feel real, too real. Barron continued down the aisles, but the faces of the people around him stayed with him. His mind raced, wondering how many of these families were just one unexpected expense away from financial disaster. He couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to change. But what could he do? He wasn't a philanthropist, and he certainly wasn't looking for a way to gain attention or praise. Still, the urge to help gnawed at him. As Barron reached the checkout line, he noticed the woman with the eggs again. She was now standing at the register, the cashier ringing up her items. Barron watched as she fumbled through her purse, counting out loose change, clearly trying to make sure she could afford everything. When the total came up, it was clear she was short. Her hands shook as she tried to decide which items to put back. The cashier stood quietly, waiting, her face filled with sympathy but offering no solution. Barron's heart sank. He couldn't watch this happen. He could see that the woman was doing her best, but it wasn't enough. She was just trying to get by, and at that moment, that wasn't enough for her. Barron knew he had to act. Without thinking twice, he approached the register. The cashier looked up in surprise when Barron stepped forward. "I'll take care of her bill," Barron said calmly, his voice steady but filled with resolve. The cashier blinked in surprise, not quite understanding. "Excuse me, sir?" "I'll pay for her groceries," Barron repeated, pointing to the woman who was still standing, embarrassed and uncertain, as she glanced at the register. The woman turned around, her eyes wide with shock. "But you don't have to," she began, her voice trembling. "I'll just take a few things off and—" "No," Barron interjected gently. "Let me take care of it." He smiled softly, reassuring her. "I've got it covered." There was a moment of stunned silence. The woman's face flushed with confusion and gratitude, and she glanced between Barron and the cashier. Finally, she managed to whisper, "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Barron said. He turned to the cashier. "Please go ahead and ring it up." The cashier hesitated, then nodded, clearly unsure of what to make of this unexpected situation. She rang up the woman's groceries, and Barron swiped his card without a second thought. As the total flashed on the screen, Barron barely blinked. For him, the price didn't matter. What mattered was that this woman could now take care of her family without having to make any further sacrifices. When the transaction was complete, The cashier handed the woman her receipt, and Barron smiled warmly at her. "Take care of your family," he said. The woman stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the generosity of a stranger. Finally, her eyes welled up with tears. I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "This means so much. You have no idea how much we've been struggling." Barron smiled again, his expression soft but steady. "You don't have to say anything. Just take care of them. That's all." The woman wiped her eyes, nodding gratefully as she hurried to collect her bags. But Barron wasn't done yet. As he turned to leave, he noticed more people in line, many of whom looked just as stressed as the woman he had helped. The same anxiety and worry were etched on their faces, the same hesitation as they considered the cost of their groceries. Barron's mind raced. He couldn't just help one person. There were so many others here just as deserving of help. What if he could do more? What if he could change not just one life but many? The thought hit him like a lightning bolt. He could buy out the entire store. Without giving it a second thought, Barron turned to the manager who was overseeing the checkout lanes. The manager was walking toward him, but Barron stopped him before he could pass. "How much is the total sales for today?" Barron asked, his voice calm but urgent. The manager looked at him, clearly confused. "Excuse me? I want to buy out the entire store," Barron said. "I want to pay for everyone's groceries today. All of it." The manager blinked, stunned. "Are you serious?" he asked, clearly unsure of whether Barron was joking. "I'm serious," Barron replied. His expression was resolute, and his decision was made. "Everyone in this store, families, individuals, anyone in need. I want to pay for it all." The manager stood there for a moment, speechless, before finally nodding. He quickly approached the microphone at the front of the store and announced Barron's offer to the entire store. Within moments, the news began to spread. At first, there was confusion. Shoppers looked around at each other, unsure if they had heard correctly. But as the announcement was made clearer, it dawned on the customers what was happening. Barron Trump, yes, the same Barron Trump they had seen on the news, was paying for their groceries. One by one, customers approached the registers, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Some cried, others couldn't speak. A few simply stood there, frozen in shock. Barron smiled softly as he watched the reactions of the people around him. He could see that his gesture had made a real difference. An elderly man approached the counter, his hands shaking as he grabbed his bags. I don't know how to thank you, sir," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You've just changed my life today." Barron simply nodded, his eyes warm. "It's no trouble at all. Take care of yourself." A young mother, holding a small baby in her arms, walked up to Barron, her eyes filled with tears. I couldn't even afford diapers this week," she said, her voice breaking. "This is a blessing. Thank you so much." Barron smiled softly, his heart swelling with warmth. "You don't need to thank me. Just take care of your baby." The store buzzed with an energy Barron had never experienced before. What had started as a simple act of kindness for one family had transformed into something far bigger. In just a few minutes, Barron had managed to bring hope to dozens of people and families who had been struggling to get by. When Barron left the store, the feeling in his chest was indescribable. It wasn't the satisfaction of doing something grand. It wasn't the sense of accomplishment. It was something much deeper, a sense of connection, a feeling that, for once, he had made a tangible difference in the lives of others. And for the families he had helped that day, their lives would never be the same. What had been a routine trip to the grocery store had turned into a life-changing moment. The stress of not knowing how to make ends meet had been lifted, replaced by a deep sense of relief. For Barron, the lesson was clear. Sometimes, a simple act of kindness could ripple out and change the world, one person at a time. And for him, it was the most fulfilling thing he had ever done.